everybody, you're listening to the Comic Book Bears podcast. I'm Billy Z.
And I'm Steve Morey.
And we're a bunch of, well, not a bunch, there's only two of us tonight. Harry Heavy Homo talking about comic books. We almost had Brian, but then his work plans changed. It's very frustrating when you have a world traveler as one of your co-hosts.
And where's he off to again this time?
San Diego was an emergency trip before Hawaii. Yes, this guy gets sent to Hawaii and Japan for work. Oh boy.
Some of the best sushi, I'm sure. He's had some great sushi and craft beer.
Kind of beats the shit out of Jersey City, I'll tell you that. And Steve, I'm in your territory starting Friday, actually. I'm working from home for 4 weeks.
Sweet.
No, sweet's not the word. Sweet isn't the word. I can think of a lot of words, and sweet's not one of them. I enjoy traveling for work a lot.
Yeah. And hotel stays and, getting too expensive off your meals. That's always a fun one.
Yeah, it's spoiled when you do it often because I can't conceive of ever paying for a hotel this century. and as you know, I mean, every time we've stayed for a convention, it's all been on my points.
Which I'm eternally grateful for, of course.
Yeah, which is a very, very nice side benefit there. But we're talking about ourselves a bit too much. Let's talk about some comic books. But before we do comics, I wanted to talk about something else. So I'm just taking a few steps back. Over the last few months, when was the launch? Was that in September or October? I believe September.
Yeah, it was at the end of September, or sort of like middle end of September.
Well, the launch we were talking about is the DC Universe app. And both Steve and I have memberships. We've both been taking advantage of having the app over the last few months. And we just wanted to go over what we've been enjoying from it. So, Steve, you were already on top of this with the actual launch date and everything. Well, why don't you tell us a little bit more about the app, and then we'll start with something that you're enjoying from it.
Well, DC had been talking about, Warner Brothers originally, but also, DC specifically, been talking about getting into the streaming game for several years now. It's something that they've had in development for a while. A nice streaming service, kind of on par with a Netflix or a Hulu or an Amazon Prime or a CBS All Access. But that would allow people, fans who are, members of the service, to see all of their old favorite DC shows, cartoons, movies, and interestingly enough, and I think what allows it to stand out from other services, is it also allows access to not an unlimited, but a expansive and continually expanding amount of comics. A lot of classic comics from the Silver Age, some more modern, some, even as recent as New 52 and Rebirth time period. But that was one of the big draws that they were pushing to kind of separate it from the pack.
I know some people that got the app just solely on the basis of the comic content.
Oh, yeah. For me, personally, it's a little bit difficult if you're trying to, say, read a comic on your TV, which, obviously you can do if you can access the app through, something that you have as a streaming device, like an Amazon Fire Stick or a Roku.
Or as I refer to it, my beloved Roku.
Sadly, not sadly, I pretty much stream everything else that I have through my Xbox. And unfortunately, DC Universe is not available on consoles just yet. But if you have an iPad, if you've got an Android tablet or an Android phone or iPhone or whatever, you can stream it on there. So for reading comics, it's actually perfect. On my iPad, I can just go ahead and spool up, the first several issues of the original Animal Man run under Morrison, or some classic Wonder Woman, or All-Star Squadron comics from the 40s and 50s. There's some pretty cool stuff that you can find if you search for it. They have other things too. They actually have a daily show that surprised me. And Bill, I don't know if you were as skeptical as I was when they first announced it, but they have a DC Daily Show, which, they purportedly, when it first was announced, every day they would have new comics news and, DC related stuff alongside panels, and, interviews and things like that. I was like, oh, that's great. They might do it for the first couple of weeks and, then kind of like run out of content and maybe do it as like a weekly show. And this is sort of like the natural progression of their, like the DC, what was it called, Bill? It was the stuff that they had on YouTube.
DC All Access.
DC All Access. So I figured like, okay, it'd be kind of like that, like maybe 5-10 minutes, here and there, maybe some, additional episodes around cons or, movie season, whatever. No, it has been a truly daily show. I think they've missed just a few days here and there.
Just around the holidays. I've watched every episode.
I don't know how you did it.
It's just one of those things where, especially with the traveling for work, it was just a nice way of kind of decompressing. They're up to 106 episodes. As I had mentioned, over the holidays, it got a little funky. They had one very short episode. They're usually between 20 and 25 minutes long.
Which is a good amount of time.
Yeah, it's a good amount of time.
That's a good amount of content, too.
Yep. There's 1,000 hosts on the show. The two I especially like are John Karunas and Hector Navarro. I think they're very good at what they do.
I like watching them. I could also watch them with the sound off. Because they're also very nice to look at. They're cute.
This is the Comic Book Bears podcast. Some of the other hosts, as I'm just going to make Caleb laugh because I'll say this, reek of failed actor. But also some of them are kind of sort of growing on me now. And maybe some of that is them growing into their function on the show. I do think especially in the early episodes, you see a lot of people trying way too hard. But
and I get that. I mean, they're probably trying to make it just it's extreme, it's cool, it's funky, it's new, da 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 da. And yeah, I mean, it really does get to the point where it's just kind of they're trying a little too hard. But like you said, they kind of grow into it. Now there are some things that I'm not a big fan of. I'm not a big fan of the roundtable readings.
I'm not a fan, but I also think they're very smart to keep those to like 5-6 minutes.
Yeah.
A lot of the content is very much biased towards the hot thing that's happening on the DC app at the time. You had a lot of Titans content, a lot of Young Justice content, and now we're recording this on the 13th of February, and Doom Patrol premieres on the 15th. So I imagine we're in for weeks and weeks of Doom Patrol dominated episodes of DC Daily. But that's okay. I'm surprised, again, just as you put it, Steve, that they haven't abandoned it or retracted it in some fashion, because they've managed to keep a 5 times a week show going.
It's good. I don't know how much it's viewed by the subscribers, if it's something that most people, catch a couple times a week, or, they watch sort of like binge watch, one day a week, something like that. I'm very bad at it. Like I'll catch it every so often. But it's not something that I watch every day. But again, I have a lot of stuff in my life. You know me, I watch way too much TV as it is. And again, like when it comes to streaming episodes, of things on this, I'm doing it mostly on my iPad just because I can't, at this point, I don't have a device that allows me to stream it to the TV easily. I can hook up my phone to the TV and or Mirrorcast it, but, I'm waiting, hopefully, as are a lot of people I know, for them to come out with an app for, the major console platforms like the PlayStation and Xbox.
Rob got me the Roku for my birthday, and it stayed in the box for like 7 weeks. Because I'm really, really bad when real life is way too busy. I still have a what do they call it? The Amazon Echo, the Alexa thing.
Yeah.
I got that as a bonus from work, and when did that happen? September, and it's still in the box. So that gives you some framework of how this stuff goes with me. But the Roku, it's been wonderful playing it through the Roku. Absolutely wonderful. It's so funny. I really associate DC Universe with the ka-dunk, ka-dunk, ka-dunk Roku sound. When you're changing the channels, I'm always going to associate ka-dunk, ka-dunk to DC Universe in some fashion. Well, the first big program that was unique to the DC Universe app was Titans. I was watching that from day one. Were you as well?
Definitely,
Yeah.
definitely. I would look forward to it every week. Not, there's part of me that still has that, and I know a lot of people are kind of in the, not as super excited every time there's a new superhero show, because we've had, the better part of the past decade has been pretty lousy in a good way with superhero shows, between everything that's on the CW with all their comic properties and with Cartoon Network and just basically everybody just coming out with comic book property type shows. I still had butterflies when I saw the preview for Titans the first time, even with the "fuck Batman" like that thing they threw in. I was like, I'm getting a live action Titans TV series. I don't care if it's not amazing out of the box. Just the fact that there is one made me super happy. And the fact that it was good was even better. I enjoyed it.
They
I
found
enjoyed the character.
some way to make an R-rated versions of Titans work.
Yeah, and not have it be...
And not have the violence be gratuitous or the language be gratuitous. I mean, you believe these characters inhabit a world where they would act this way.
Yeah. Definitely. And, there, as with any show and any adaptation, there's, minor squibbles here and there about, is this character, doing what you would expect them to do? Are they moving too slowly for this character's story arc, too quickly for this other one, not giving us enough of this? Fine. Everybody's going to have something that's not exactly what they wanted. But this show, in 11 episodes, did an amazing job in drawing us into a really great world. And it gave us a taste of what kind of quality we can expect from the original series that DC Universe greenlit a lot last year. There's a lot of new series coming up. So if Titans, bombed right out of the bag, it would have been a disaster.
And according to some of the metrics, out of streaming shows, Young Justice is number 1 and Titans is number 4.
Yeah, which is interesting.
Which is really interesting, yeah.
And I think some of that may be because I know, there are definitely way more people subscribed to Netflix than there are DC Universe. I think what they're also doing is they're bringing in the numbers outside of the U.S. because Titans has the license to be shown on Netflix everywhere outside the U.S. right now. I think the same thing with Young Justice.
There's a couple markets that it hasn't hit, but that basically is the case.
The only place where DC Universe is available as of now is the U.S. And so I think a lot of people were kind of disappointed at that. Obviously all this content that DC Universe has and some, exclusively through DC Universe, some shows that you can't find anywhere else in their library. But outside Canada, UK, European territories, Asian territories can watch these same shows on Netflix. I don't know if it's going to be for all of them, though. It just kind of depends on their rollout plan for the app everywhere else.
And they've been very public about hoping to get a DC Universe comparative app in some markets. Some of the international contracts will never allow it. It's a pretzel entanglements legally. They did say that specifically Canada and Brazil look like they're coming up at some point fairly soon down the pike.
It was surprising to me that Canada wasn't included in the original launch because a lot of these shows, there's a lot of interesting, licensing and history there with different TV stations and the way that they kind of cross-pollinated different studios and channels properties. But, I would have thought it would have been a lot easier to launch that alongside the US, but I guess not. But anyway, Titans was the first one, and then came...
Why don't you just give us just a little bit of a framework of what actually is happening in Titans?
So Titans, of course, introduces the 4 main Titans characters. Robin, the Dick Grayson Robin, who now is independent, working on his own in Detroit. Starfire, who seems to be an international woman of mystery, who speaks multiple languages, kicks ass, and can fry Russian mobsters.
I think importantly is dealing with amnesia.
Yes,
And when we first see her.
amnesiac. She doesn't know why or
She
how.
doesn't know who or why or what she is.
Exactly. Raven, who is the main focus of the first season, a little girl who's being pursued, teenage girl who's being pursued by people who are trying to kidnap her, capture her, kill her, as well as also dealing with literal demons or a demonic presence in her that allows her to do supernatural and preternatural things. And then finally Beast Boy, who they encounter a little bit later on, who has the ability to turn into a tiger, only a tiger at this point, and also lives with a bunch of weird misfits in a mansion, led by some dude in a wheelchair. So we'll talk about that next because that's coming up soon. But yeah, so they find each other, they lose each other, they find each other again, they split apart, they come back together, and all sorts of things happen throughout the course of the series to essentially figure out a way to find out what's happening with Raven, how to stop it, how to stop the organization that's behind this, and then try to figure out how to save her from what unfortunately is coming. And along the way, of course, you've also got wonderful cameos, actually a lot of fun cameos from Hawk and Dove and from Wonder Girl. Wonder Girl especially was amazing to see her in action, but also to have her character there as a great foil to Dick Grayson's character.
Yep.
And she only was in, I think, maybe 3 episodes.
And you also have to mention Jason Todd as well.
And Jason Todd does make a couple appearances as well as the new Robin, putting old Robin / Dick Grayson on the path to what all of us fans always know is going to happen, inevitably, Dick Grayson, Nightwing. But man, did they do a great job teasing the crap out of us, but never actually taking that step. Just every opportunity to throw in hey, he's becoming a Nightwing? Not yet. Hey, look, some Tonfa. Nah, he's not going to use him.
And you also do have some very deep dives throughout the show from obscure DC characters. One of the principal villains, I always use musical terms. I probably would get along with your husband really well on this. Effectively the 3 o'clock to 7 o'clock period of the nuclear family as a villain, who's a fairly obscure outsider's concept, and they've made it weave into something that doesn't feel out of place. Even at the end of the season, they introduce elements from one of DC's other marquee franchise worlds. And it also feels organic, just in the bumper. And that was, if you missed that bumper, oh baby, go back. If you watched the final episode of the first season of Titans and didn't wait for the post credits, stop listening to this. Just move over to whatever the 54-minute mark or whatever, and just go. Just drop everything and go.
And that iconic, that little, what was it, 30 seconds maybe? That's come up relatively frequently recently, at least in another property that just had its debut on the DC Universe app.
But before we transition to that, I just want to interject in relation to Titans. I think it's a remarkably well cast show.
Oh, yeah.
I think that the action sequences, particularly involving Hawk and Dove, have been Daredevil level action sequences. I don't like this wait until September or October when it comes back. I want it now. In all honesty, I'm surprised how good it was. I can't think of any TV version of a show where there isn't something I would doctor a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm really happy with what's been delivered so far with Titans. Really, really happy.
Like I mentioned, a lot was riding on the success of this show the quality of this show. And I think that they really proved themselves as a new streaming service, which, I mean, we're getting to the point where we're almost going to be oversaturated with streaming services. I mean, channels are coming up left, right, and center with their own service because they want to compete with Netflix. Terrestrial TV signals are, not the wave of the future. The same thing with cable. It's not the wave of the future. It's these a la carte, pick your own, what kind of content do you want to see streaming services. Netflix really, leading the charge, but now with Disney, apparently their ESPN Plus service has got 20 million freaking subscribers now. But Disney Plus is right around the corner as well, possibly launching later this year with all these new Star Wars content series.
And Marvel.
Hulu is coming out with a whole bunch of more Marvel stuff because, again, Disney's going to be 60% of the control of that streaming service. So, there's a lot that's out there, and they just set themselves apart.
I think how things are going to play out, I don't think you're going to see the retraction of networks. I think they're still going to exist. But I also think there's going to be a very different kind of conception of shows if they are going to be based on the episodic day after day or something that's going to be unleashed all at once. I think that's really going to affect the storytelling in some fashion.
Well, and even with a lot of these streaming services, like I'll take CBS All Access as a great example because they have a lot of original streaming service only content with the new Star Trek series, Discovery, of course, but then the upcoming ones, the Good Fight, some other series that they had recently. Tell Me a Story, I think, was one of them. They're episodic, but they're also released on a weekly schedule.
Yeah.
And it's an interesting choice to do that.
Young Justice Outsiders has deviated from that a little bit in that they were 3 episodes at a time. Apart from the final week before the mid-season break, which was 4. Kind of small deviation from that, but still not the whole shebang in one shot. Well, God, I leaked it. So, Young Justice Outsiders, why don't you bridge us into that?
Well, we had a 2-week break, and part of me is thinking the 2-week break might not have been there had it not been for the fact that Titans only had 11 episodes this seasons. This particular season.
And I think that's worth mentioning. Yeah, I think that's worth mentioning when they did get the word that they were going to get renewed even before premiere of the second season. What was intended as a 12-episode season was reconfigured to an 11-episode season.
Yeah, and now episode number 12 is going to be not the season premiere for season 2, the entire 12th episode. What they're going to do is integrate parts of what was episode 12 and work it into a new season premiere for season 2. So probably finish up what they started in the first season and then let it flow into the next story arc, which is a great idea. I think that's kind of cool that they saw what direction that they were going to go and how it was going to play out and allowed them to make some different decisions on how they want the plot to either resolve or go into the next stage. And that 2-week break, I could tell you, was a lot of build-up for Young Justice Season 3. And why is that, Bill? Why was Season 3 of Young Justice so exciting for people who are big fans of Young Justice?
I don't know why, because it seemed to come right on the heels of 2.
Yeah. So, I think like a lot of people who are huge fans of Young Justice, Season 2, which was Invasion, when did that end? Was that 2012?
2012, I believe, yeah.
I mean, 7 years. So it got canned, and I'm going to say canned, by Cartoon Network, probably for a bunch of reasons. And we talked about, and also the studio.
So it was also Mattel as well.
Yeah, and Mattel. Yeah,
Which
there were a lot of reasons.
That always puzzled me because there really weren't that many Young Justice toys out. But at least that's one of the reasons they cite was the show could have been more toyetic, which I thought was, well, if that's the case, give me Chip. Can you imagine a Chip toy or Wolf? Be like amazing action figures, and we'll go into that a little later because I am shocked that there are not some version of Young Justice collectibles out there right now.
There should be. There
Yeah,
should be, but
it just baffles me.
for
But
I think that was the problem because a lot of people loved watching the show and they weren't as interested in buying the merchandise for it. And so that, especially when you're on commercial TV and that's kind of the target audience are people who are of a certain age, but also of a certain amount of mommy buy me that.
and I just think it was a case of not really knowing who their audience was. Comic book sales will never tell you that story because they don't really
Mhm.
correlate. So when you did see a Young Justice comic that was pulling maybe 11,000 copies a month, you can't get a real vibe of that. But it was a show that had a remarkably fanatic fan base. I know one person who never read a comic before and got sucked into Young Justice. And I think some of it is the timestamps because there is, in some ways, like a soap opera element to that. You have a very good sense of spatial sequence with the show
Yeah.
because it's very clear the time frame when these things take place. It's its own world. Oh God, there's Jersey. It's its own world, and they tie all these disparate elements into this nice string. You have milestone characters that are part of the Young Justice world. I do think the first season is really a textbook case of how to world build with an already existing template and somehow keep it fresh and keep it unique.
And it told a linear story. It told a linear story where there was real progression and growth in all the characters, but also in the environment that they operated in throughout each season. And I think that was really unique, but it wasn't something that they saw that you would see in most cartoon series on Cartoon Network. Like, yes, you can make the arguments like, well, Adventure Time, things change over time. Yeah. But specifically Young Justice, like you said, had the timestamps. When things were happening. You could follow the development of the story and what was happening with these characters, and they always referred back to, hey, remember what happened on, a couple days ago, which was in last episode or 2 episodes ago. Things like that would come up again where, if you're a big fan of Teen Titans Go, there's no continuity in that really.
And there should be.
And there shouldn't be.
There should be.
It's an absurd show. It's fun. It's crazy and wacky, and it's mostly for young people. I enjoy it too.
Well, I do think at
but I'm not
this
the
point,
intended audience.
now keep in mind I watch it as the episodes hit with Teen Titans Go. I think the show is now in that Bullwinkle type of territory where it clearly has an appeal to young children, but there are references on that show that go way over the heads. I was watching Bullwinkle once. There is a literary reference that if you were not an English major in college, I don't think you would have caught it. Because I didn't know, and I found out about it from an English major in college. And I do think Teen Titans Go, if you watch how insane seasons 4 and 5 have been, it certainly feeds into that kind of parallel track interest. I think of something that is, I don't want to say highbrow, but is very clever, and at the same token that there's enough of the ha 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 that the kids get sucked in.
Yeah, and alternatively, Young Justice is definitely not like that. They are aware of strong conceptual storytelling, but it's not self-aware. There's no real winking to the audience. There's no like meta goofiness going on. It's a serious show.
It's a very serious. There's deaths in the show.
Yeah, there's serious relationships and like fallout from those relationships and deaths. Like it's very mature storytelling.
That's exactly what I was going to say. There's a hell of a lot of emotional resonance. Before we keep going on Young Justice, we probably should say that the concept of Young Justice is that there are sidekicks to these existing superheroes that are part of the Justice League. And at the time where some are expecting to be inducted into the Justice League, the League members, specifically Batman, take a different tact and form this covert team with the membership existing with these younger sidekick-oriented members, and then it fills people in. So they never even call themselves Young Justice. They only refer to themselves as the team. Have you ever noticed that?
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
Or
I
the
don't
Teen
think
Titans or anything like that. You have seen members effectively graduate from the younger Young Justice team to the main team of the Justice League. My one criticism of the show is the character designs are very hit or miss with me. I think there are some that are perfect, and there are others like Vandal Savage where I just wonder what in hell they were thinking. Maybe that's kind of amplified because it is a favorite character of mine. For me, I don't know how it is for you, Steve, but for me, they're completely hit or miss with the character designs.
I like the design and sort of like the aesthetic that they have with this version of Earth and the DC superheroes. You know, how they present the traditional Justice League characters and how they present the, you know, a lot of these characters were relatively pretty well known, but then there were also some that were new at the time that Young Justice came out. And I'm thinking specifically Aqualad, the Calderon Aqualad, was relatively new. He, you know, here's one of the other benefits of the DC Universe thing. If you don't feel like going to a different website like Wikipedia, a lot of times they're very helpful and have a full database on pretty much every character.
Absolutely,
and
yes.
Depending on the time, like what they're promoting at that time, like, hey, if they're talking about Young Justice, guess what? There's a lot of here's all of your Young Justice character profiles and their histories and what issues they came from and, you know, power levels, things like that, which is kind of cool. But Calderon was relatively new. Now, you know, some of the other characters too, they reimagined specifically for Young Justice by tweaking things just a little bit. And Superboy, of course, is one of those big ones where, you know, it's still the post death of Superman version of Superboy. The oh my god, I've forgotten his name. Connor, yeah. Connell. That version where it's the clone version of Superman, and he was created by Cadmus in a lab, and he, you know, escapes from the lab. But they did alter that origin just enough to make him less of a, you know, 90s extreme punk and more of a stoic, you know, early 2000 kind of like jock who also has quite a bit of, you know, if he knew what the Cure was, he probably would have listened to a lot of it.
I don't know. I found him more to be like from that Disturbed Slipknot kind of.
Maybe. I mean, he was quick to anger rather than quick to be sad, but he did.
Yeah.
He might have been a juggalo. It's possible.
Oh God, no. God, no. No.
I don't know.
No,
like
no.
if he discovered Faygo, he might have, like, you know, really loved that pineapple soda.
No, I see him
got some clown makeup.
Jumping into the mosh pit before bothering with the eyeliner.
If he jumps into the mosh pit, he would kill everybody in it accidentally. And he wouldn't notice until later.
So with Young Justice, we've done the same thing. Because there's been this huge gap from when the show originally aired to now that we got the third season, both of us have been watching the show from the beginning. I've gotten farther along, but Steve, you are still in the midst of season 2, is that correct?
Yeah, I've been really behind because I've watched way too much TV, so I have to parcel out my time. But I am, when I have the chance, going through and binging about 3-4 episodes at a time. At 20 minutes a piece, it's not that hard. But yeah, it is great going back, and I do have to say, this show does hold up. If you haven't watched the original season or the first 2 seasons in a while, they do hold up very well. Some of the earlier episodes are a little shaky, but not by much. It's still fascinating and fantastic watching these characters grow and change.
They found their footing very quickly.
Yes, yes,
very
they did.
quickly.
And should I mention that there's another great benefit for going back and rewatching that is on DC Universe? You can see the quote unquote director's cut versions of some of these older episodes. Not all of them, but some of them actually with director's commentary, actor commentary, and writer commentary, which is really fascinating to listen to.
Another thing I have to say with Young Justice, there's a lot of novel things about it. Now, again, what we had mentioned that the show basically is this junior covert version of the Justice League. The first season, we are introduced to a counterpart of the Legion of Doom called the Light. And the Light continues to be a presence through the series. The second season is known as Justice League Invasion, and it basically is centered around a planned alien invasion. Man, there's a lot of pretzel logic in that second season. There's a lot of strings that start here and go there. But the show is so novel in many ways. The Superman Superboy relationship. You would think Superman would embrace this kid, and he's suspect from the beginning.
Mm-hmm.
It was a nice twist on that. I also really like the Atlantean culture and how nuanced Kaldor is. Second season, one of the what was Blue Beetle's the Black Beetle, the villain?
Yeah, I want to
Yeah,
say it was Black Beetle, who's the large, the bigger
the
guy.
bigger version. It's
Yeah.
so interesting to see a heavy villain like that who has a great sense of humor. I mean, some of the funniest lines in the show come from him.
Yeah.
Some really good stuff, and I don't think we're doing it justice. Ha ha ha! T-slap in our description
Hardy
of it.
har.
But it is a great series. I have gone through the mid-season point, which is all there is at this point. We're still waiting for the resumption of the episodes for season 3, and it is called Young Justice Outsiders, and they do introduce a number of elements from the Outsiders comic. It basically, at its core, tells the story of Geoforce and Halo at this point. Terra's there. You have Jefferson Pierce, Black Lightning involved. You had an amazing sequence with Batman Katana and Metamorpho. It hasn't all gelled yet, but basically the Young Justice team have effectively adopted, and this is really funny, for years, since 1985, I have been calling Geoforce Bryon, and it's Brion. So, spoiler. That's how you pronounce his first name. Since 1985, I've been mispronouncing his first name.
You can take Brion out for some
Yeah.
brioche later.
So you do have the Young Justice team members basically coalescing around these new metahumans who have emerged. And Steve, I can't wait for you to watch season 3 because there's 2 episodes that are just fantastic. And I worry for one particular character that's a favorite. There's a lot of good stuff there. A lot of good stuff. God, this is like a dismal review of it because it's awesome. It's really good.
It's good. There's good stuff. I can't tell you anything that happens.
It's so good. One recommendation I do have for people is that there is a comic book that is exclusive to the DC Universe app, which bridges the second and third season. Before you watch the third season, if you've gotten through the first and second, make sure you read that comic. The other Young Justice comics, which were from the print series that they had while the show was happening in the first round, they're basically like side adventures. They're not as critical. This one is kind of important, so make sure you read that. Have you read that, Steve? Probably not.
No, I need to go through everything else first.
Now you know.
You just need to finish season 2.
Okay. So out of the other material on DC Universe, what have you been looking at?
Well, like I said, I've actually been using the comics or reading the comics a lot more than I thought I would be. And again, it has things there for you if you choose to use them. So if you're looking to just, watch old TV shows or old cartoons, have at it. There's plenty. You can see, the original, Batman animated series, the new Batman Adventures, Super Friends, all of the Super Friends.
All of the Super Friends.
All of them. Every single one of them. And I should tell you right now that a lot of the ones I've watched don't hold up as even examples of good animation. But hey, it's nostalgic, so it's cool. But then you also have, the original Adventures of Superboy live action show. You've got the Adventures of Lois and Clark that you may not have seen for a while. That pilot for that.
Yeah, the Adventures of Superman from the 50s and the
Exactly.
Wonder Woman from the 70s in a beautiful remaster. Absolutely beautiful colors there.
Yeah, Blu-ray quality, real well, as close as they can get for late 70s TV, and even some of the weird, wacky parts of DC television history, like the Aquaman pilot that never got off the ground, starring Justin Hartley,
which I like a lot.
Green Lantern.
I'm shocked with some of the shit that ended up on the CW that this wasn't picked up. Man.
I know it's weird, but it is what it is. And then you also have the really like, holy shit, what were they smoking? Legends of what was it?
Legends of the Superheroes.
Legends of the Superheroes, which is like, my God, there's two episodes for that.
The Chase and the Roast.
Yes. I have to say that if you've never seen 70s camp at its height, this is, oh boy, Sinestro alone is enough to, I don't know. I mean, I can't, like, it's problematic, but what the hell? All of the 70s was massively problematic. And so you just kind of have to enjoy it for the ridiculousness that it is. And see, like Batman, Adam West. It's just, the original Batman and Robin buying a used car, walking. Like, it's like, there's just weirdness, complete weirdness.
Let's just say the Star Wars Holiday Special didn't exist in a vacuum.
There was a lot of garbage and bad choices.
You have to understand, I'm a child of the 70s. We got this shit week after week on the Donnie Marie show and Tony Orlando and Dawn, and oh my God. It's of its time, and that's the only way you can watch some of these programs. They do have theatrical movies on the app.
Yes.
I'm surprised that has been one of the functions of the rotation, because they did take some of the Superman films with Christopher Reeve out of rotation and basically substituted them with the Burton Batman series. I'm not sure where that's going to fall. But you also have some non-superhero content like the Human Target TV series.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
You have almost not all of the DC animated universe movies, but a good amount of them. And that's really because of the complications with some of the films being exclusive to other services at this time. But with Reign of the Superman, which is the most recent one, going forward, they are going to be having that on the app the day of the home video Blu-ray release going forward. So that's a nice little plus there too. Now, Steve, I have been reading comics on the app as well. And I did something a little anal, if you can put it that way. And I've been reading the DC comics that are on the DC app in order. So my member name is comicbookbears.21324. Don't ask me why I haven't changed. I can't seem to do it because it was one of the free memberships. But they took the email address and gave me a number, and that's me. But if you do look up me on the app, I have put together 4 lists of DC Golden Age comics, DC Bronze Age comics, DC Silver Age comics, and DC 80s pre-crisis. I've been using Mike's Amazing World as a template for when the books actually came out, so it's been a lot of action comics and detective comics from the late 30s and early 40s, but I'm slowly going through the books that are on the app in the sequence that they were released. Which, thank God for spreadsheets, because there's no way you could do it without. That's real dedication if you did that. You can tap into my list if you want to do that. And that's another nice feature of the app because there is a community base. I haven't been a part of it as much as I would like to, just because of time concerns with, as we said, real life. But there's some very dedicated members of the community there, and you can create lists for yourself of what you've watched and what you read or what you want to read, and you can share them with other people. Which is a really nice function. And in terms of reading comics on your TV, I effing
Did you just censor yourself?
I just censored myself because we just been talking about children's TV.
The children's. Think of the children's.
I have to say, I never thought I would get used to it, but you do. At least on the Roku with the tunk. But I've gotten used to it very, very easily, and that's been a nice side thing of from my regular comics reading to be going through this stuff with some kind of sequential order from the 40s. So God knows if I'm going to live long enough to make the 80s. I doubt it, but maybe I don't know. I posted this week. One of my goals is to live to see Superman's 100th anniversary in 2038, and I'm not going to tell you what age I will be then, but there's a lot there for the DC Comics app, and I'm really glad it exists. I'll be very interested to see what Disney Plus is and the Marvel content that they provide there. It sounds like they are not planning comic book content, I think because of Marvel Unlimited already existing. But I think from the first few months, they're off to a really good start, and I still think that there's so much more they could do. Enjoying it very, very much. Very glad it exists. I can't say it's a site I hit every day, and I can't say that about a lot of stuff. So, and I am a DC zombie. I'm the first to admit it. I would love to be on that couch because I know so much more than some of those people. But
plus, you'll get to sit next to Hector.
John's my real crush.
Oh, John too.
Karunis is my real crush. I think I'd rather drink with Hector, and I'd rather end up in the hotel room with John. Does that sound okay?
That's good. That's good.
Yeah. And then in this last week, they had like Paul Dini on too, and it's like, oh my god, that's a whole lot of. So if you're a comic book bear, literally, there's a lot for you on this app too.
Which is nice. That is always nice. Well, I for one, am definitely looking forward to Doom Patrol starting this week. That is something that I just am excited that they've decided to take a lot of inspiration from the Morrison run. So, we'll see how far they go. I know at least we've got, Mr. Nobody and the Brotherhood of Dada as one of the main villains in the series, but we'll see what else they might be able to conjure up. So I'm pretty excited to see it. And one of the good things that I do like, they have a good group that's curating and quote unquote synergizing the different mixed media that they have when they do premiere a new series or have a particular thing that they're promoting. They feature a lot of the things that coincide with it. So for Doom Patrol, they're featuring a collection of Morrison's run on the Doom Patrol series in the late 80s and early 90s. So that's there, so you can read those comics if you like. That inspired the TV show. They have little, character sort of backgrounds that are available right on the front landing page of the app itself. So yeah, it's cool.
They also have the entire Silver Age run. The entire Silver Age run is on there.
They do, which is, it's not Morrison's kind of meta wackiness, but it is still pretty weird.
It's pretty damn weird.
Yeah.
Particularly the villains. The villains are really out there. Like Animal, Vegetable, Mineral Man and
yes.
General Immortus. I mean, Gargox. I mean, these are really weird villains. Really, really strange shit. The X-Men weren't the only weirdos.
These were the weirdos before the X-Men.
Yeah. Well, yeah, they're like, I'm not exactly sure what the time period was. There's a lot of weird synergy.
Cross-pollination.
Both teams are led by an older mentor in a wheelchair. There's a lot of weird things that just happen. You see that through comics, with Swamp Thing and Man Thing emerging at the same time. It's happened in the past. If you like the weirder elements of X-Men, I think Doom Patrol is up your street. If you are listening and you are a Marvel zombie and you like some of the really weird X-Men shit, Doom Patrol, I think, is right in your wheelhouse if the regular DC universe isn't. Just trying to think if there's anything we should talk about else with DC Universe. Oh, DC Universe app. Can I please win one of these friggin' sweepstakes already?
Oh, seriously.
Oh,
I keep entering every time, and
every
it's
time.
great on them that they have so many of them for like all these really cool things, like win a whole set of statues, or a one of a kind printing, or a whole package of everything, like every movie of this whatever. They're great, they're cool. I don't win any of them.
The one I really wanted was the Titan statues.
Oh,
The DC Direct Titan
all the
statues,
interlocking
all stuff.
ones.
Oh my
Yes.
God. The cheapest I've found those has been 80 per unit, so that
That's
that ain't in my budget. So I think it's pretty safe to say that we'll continue to be using the DC Universe app. Just one word regarding what's in the future. We have a Swamp Thing live action series that is premiering after the Doom Patrol live action series. We have a second season of Titans. We have the second half of season 3 of Young Justice. We have a Stargirl series, and we have a Harley Quinn animated series coming up. That's all before the end of 2019. Beyond 2019, there's a series called Metropolis that is still in development, which apparently is Metropolis before Superman arrives. We've got a lot of content to look forward to there. All right, Steve,
so.
we're a comic books podcast, so why don't you throw
Are
the comic?
we?
Yes, we are. Yeah, it's not just all the offshoots there. So why don't you tell me about a comic book you're enjoying, and then I'll come back at you with one that I am.
Well, I'm going to talk about two together, just as one, because they're part of the of an interesting sort of comic concept event, etc. Going on right now in the X-Men titles, and specifically, I'm talking about Age of X-Man. Sort of a play off of the Age of Apocalypse from the 90s. So if you had been following the Uncanny X-Men, the latest volume of that, Nathan Gray, or X-Man, has come back and was leading a fight against all the combined forces of the X-Men, along with doing a whole bunch of other shenanigans. He has his 4 Horsemen of the Rapture, including Magneto, Blob, Omega Red, and there was one more. Was it Archangel? No. I can't remember. But anyway.
I can't help you out there, brother.
It's just things happened. A whole bunch of stuff happened. And, spoiler warning, at the end of Uncanny X-Men I believe it was number 10 or 11, basically he appeared to have completely disintegrated everybody. All of the X-Men who were there fighting him turned to dust. Now, of course, we know that that's not exactly what happened. Something else must have happened. And it appears what he did was he teleported them or did something to create this new universe, this new Earth, where everybody's a mutant. Children are conceived and born in test tubes or birthing pods, and interestingly enough, there are no romantic relationships. There's no quote unquote love between people of any romantic nature. So it's essentially I don't want to say it's without emotion, but it's specifically it's every person is essentially an individual. And yes, you can work together and everybody works together for the common good, but that's about as close as you can get. And so this is the sort of launching point. There was a singular Age of X-Men starting book, almost an issue 0 essentially. And then from there, there's, I believe, 5 total series that they are coming out as part of the Age of X-Men. So the first 2 that have been released as of time of this recording are the Marvelous X-Men and Next Gen.
The Marvelous X-Men.
Marvelous X-Men. Marvelous. And Next Gen. So, they basically focus on different characters. So Marvelous X-Men is kind of like the flagship title, with X-Man himself leading a team of different X-Men in interesting designs. So Cyclops has one arm. Nature Girl is on the team as a main player. Storm doesn't even have a mohawk. She's got no hair. And and Magneto's part of the team. It's a very interesting concept. The art is beautiful. Zach Thompson and Lonnie Nadler are doing the writing. Marco Faya is doing the art on it, and it's just I think it's beautiful. I think this book is great. It's very interesting. Of course, we're still building this world a little bit and getting to know and understand the concepts. In the first issue, it's a fire in Los Angeles that all the team of the Marvelous X-Men come together to save everybody, including the forest creatures and all of the babies in the birthing pods, and put out the fire. And that's the big focus on this. But along the way, X-23 discovers something and has to have her mind wiped, interestingly enough. So I'm not going to go into that too much. And Next Gen, in that first issue, follows the young X-Men, sort of like the Generation X group, or the Wolverine and the X-Men team of characters: Glob, Armor, Knoll, Shark Girl, etc. And their just their day-to-day life in the school, which is generally interesting. But a lot of the focus is on Glob in this issue, and Glob has really come out as one of everybody's favorite young X-Men, or at least one that people love to talk about, because he's so weird, but he also seems to have the most, the most interesting outlook on life, the way that he's being written in the past several years. So this one, Ed Brisson is taking the writing duties, and Marcus Toe the art duties, with Jason Keith on colors. And again, the art is great. It's perfect for the book. It has a great flow to it, and it really allows you to be introduced into this new conceptual world from the younger X-Men's perspective. It also, again, Comic Book Bear podcast, has Blob shows up in a couple panels, shirtless.
Ew.
And he's a bit furry, and has a goatee. It's actually pretty woofy.
Jesus.
Yeah, not unexpected. Marcus Toe, I don't know, drawing him that way. Basically looks like a powerlifter. But anyway, it's just interesting. It's a really interesting concept. And again, in this one of the action sequences also involves a fire. So we're starting to see some similar concepts are coming up. There's some things that are repeating. Fire seems to be a pretty big concept. This sort of rebellious resistance that encourages love, that somehow involves apocalypse. For some reason, and of course refers to some of the other books that are going to be released over the coming weeks. Amazing Nightcrawler, that focuses on Nightcrawler as a international movie star. The Extremis, that focuses on another group of characters who are there to enforce the laws and rules and regulations of this new world. Prisoner X, which is a series that focuses on basically the ones that break the laws, including Bishop, who was in the opening sort of introductory book, was sent to this prison. And then finally, of course, Apocalypse and the X-Tracks, which is the view of this world from the Resistance. And it looks like it might be very psychedelic from the cover concept. So we shall see. But that's going to continue. I think they're all 4 or 5 issues apiece. If the art and the writing for the other series continues to be along the lines of what were in these first couple of issues, these for Marvelous and Next Gen, I'll be happy, because right now I can recommend these. I hate the whole sort of like new series alternate reality concept minis for events. It annoys me to no end. But these are actually pretty cool and readable, so I might have to rethink my stance on those. But Age of X-Men so far is actually pretty cool.
Okay.
Kind of makes up for Uncanny X-Men being kind of boring for the past 10 issues. So, yeah, that's what I got. Bill, what are you looking at? What are you reading?
Okay, a book I want to talk about is Peter Cannon Thunderbolt from Dynamite Comics. Thunderbolt was a character that was initially created at Charlton Comics when they had their initiative. Oh God, what did they call their line of their Action Heroes line? Sorry, couldn't think of Action Heroes. Which was Charlton superheroes. Some of the other heroes in that line included Captain Atom and Blue Beetle and the Question. For the most part, the majority of the characters were created or co-created by Steve Ditko. Thunderbolt was one that was not. He was created by Pete Morrissey. Pete Morrissey is one of the most interesting comic book creators of all time. He was a writer and artist, and comic books weren't his main source of income. He was a New York City police officer who wrote comic books in his spare time. And one of his creations was Thunderbolt. Now, Thunderbolt, in its initial version, was Peter Cannon, who was the son of doctors who were part of an American medical team who went to the Himalayas to combat the dreaded Black Plague. They eventually died from the plague as well. But before they did, they entrusted Peter to be raised in a lamasery, which is, no, not a monastery if you have llamas. It's a lamasery. See, you learn things from comic books. And as he was growing, he attained a very high degree of mental and physical perfection. And once he was of age, he had these abilities. He unharnessed areas of the brain that most people can't. So he was enhanced in some way. And then returned to the Western world and found the best way to do good in the Western world was as a superhero. So very basic, classic Silver Age comic book origin. The character is interesting in that it's one of the rare instances where DC lost the rights to a character. The estate of Pete Morrissey was able to reclaim that with the copyright laws that came into effect in 1976. And, well, there's Lawyer Bill coming through. Again, they were able to recapture, and I'm not sure if it was a sale to Dynamite or a license agreement. The copyright just says Dynamite in the comic, but for the last few years, he has been part of Dynamite's publishing. There was one previous series that came out, which was kind of standard fare. This one is a bit different. We're at a time where we anxiously await the next long delayed issue of Doomsday Clock. Now, again, the Watchmen were based primarily on the Charlton figures. It was a pitch that Alan Moore had, and the biggest problem with Alan Moore's pitch with the original Charlton characters, which eventually led to the creation of Watchmen, is basically the Charlton characters were unusable after the story was over. What you have with Peter Cannon Thunderbolt is kind of, at least through my eyes, a companion piece to Doomsday Clock of taking these tropes that Watchmen developed into its own kind of vibe and plays with it in some ways a follow-up. It's interesting in that this version of Peter is a bit of an elitist. There's a very cynical side to him. Just like Ozymandias, he believes the weight of the world is on his shoulders. He enlists a team, so there are new heroes that come around. There basically is this combination of mystical and scientific elements that are doing something to the world, but no one's exactly sure what is happening. It's just people know that something is off. Through the efforts of Thunderbolt, he's going to get to the bottom of it. The artist on the book is somebody I have never heard of, Casper Wingard. And the writer is Kieran Gillen, who has had Marvel credits out the waz. And one element I really have to salute is the colorist, Mary Safro, who gives a very vibrant palette to this particular book. So that's a big cheer from me for Peter Cannon, Thunderbolt #1 from Dynamite.
Well, it's really nice to hear that they're giving this character, a really good book, and that the team on it sounds great. And, sometimes with Dynamite, there's a little bit of, some hit and miss, but it sounds like they're really giving this a good chance, and that's pretty cool. I might check that out.
Dynamite has been really kind of hit or miss for me in recent years. There have been many instances where, like, what a cover, too bad you opened it. Ooh, sorry. If you go to my comic bunker, you will see many, many Dynamite Entertainment books. I can say that. Peaks and valleys. If they continue to put out books like this, I'll be buying more.
Cool. All
right, Steve, what else you got?
Well, I've been really enjoying it, and I know I've talked about these series before, but what Ahoy Comics has been putting out over the past 6 months has been just absolutely fantastic. I've been reading actually every series that they have out, and they're all pretty much finishing up their first arc and going on hiatus now. One of the latest ones is The Wrong Earth, and this one, I think this book kind of surprised a lot of people. Maybe not so many people. I'm sure, people were looking for Tom Payer and of course Jamal Eigel's art in this book, and Tom Payer on writing duties. But I was just so blown away with a relatively simple concept, taking a pretty standard trope and just playing with it to the extreme. And in Wrong Earth specifically, if you're not familiar with it, the character Dragonfly Man is a very campy, very sort of, goofy concept, 60s version of a superhero, very much like a Batman 66. He's got Stinger, his little sidekick. They do a lot of G Willikers, and, when they fight, they make the big, pow and bam sound effects. And of course, the villains are colorful and silly. But one of Dragonfly Man's biggest villains and his arch nemesis is the aptly named Number One. And Number One has a gang of different characters that, of course, are all numbers. Like his number two is, the typical 60s baby doll Maul. And then there's Trace and Quattro and Cinco and, all the other different, number characters as henchmen. Well, something happens, and both Dragonfly Man and Number One seem to be sucked into this interesting mirror that Number One has found or created. We're not really too clear on it. And they go into this apparent mirror world. At the same time, the Number One from that mirror world, as well as the Dragonfly Man, just made simply Dragonfly, switch places. They come into Dragonfly Man's world. And so the interesting thing about this is that Dragonfly's world is gritty. It is hardcore, extreme, early 90s, Nightfall style Gotham. Everybody's pretty hyper violent. There's corrupt police left, right, and center. Dragonfly himself has kind of lost all sense of hope in humanity and faith in humanity. Stinger's dead. Number One's a psycho slasher like Mr. Zaz. It's very, a very big, deep contrast. But what Payer and Eigel both do in sort of presenting these characters, these fish out of water in each other's worlds, is pretty ingenious. So you have Dragonfly using his gritty, hyper violence on these goofy characters, these goofy villains. He just doesn't understand that world. And of course, Dragonfly Man is very much Pollyanna in this world where everything's kind of falling apart and is riddled with crime. So at the end, in issue number 6, I think Payer does a really good job in wrapping it up. But he doesn't do it with a neat little bow. He pretty much ends with and I'm not spoiling too much here, but the characters stay where they are. Dragonfly Man finds himself stuck in this gritty world, and Dragonfly himself, is in the goofy sort of Pollyanna world. So, where they're going to go from there, it's hard to say, but they do set up a few interesting tidbits to kind of reveal that maybe these aren't the only two worlds that are out there. There might be something else, and there might be something more sinister on the horizon. It's great. I think it's a fun read. Like all the other Ahoy Comics issues, there's plenty of back matter to read on, essays that have been, submitted and added into the back pages, along with the letters page, and then also sort of a sub story that's continuing or concluding another sort of small short story with an example from Dragonfly's past. So it's cool. I really love Ahoy, what they've been putting out. Their books are great. They're fun to read. The action is well done. And of course, Jamal Weigel, love his art. So therefore, Wrong Earth, great book altogether. Hopefully they'll be releasing a trade soon so you can read all 6 issues together. But if not, you can hopefully still find the floppies out there. And I totally recommend picking them up. Not just for the main story, but also for all the back matter, because those essays are a hoot to read.
Yeah, with some of the back matter material, I've already mentioned on the show that my former co-host of the Thundercast, Rob Stager, has some of the prose material in there. And if you go to Captain Ginger #4, you will see a credit by Audrey Ryer for a 2-page story. Audrey Ryer is the daughter of my friend Sharon Galbraith Ryer, and I've been friends with Sharon for over 30 years.
That is awesome.
That is pretty cool to be 18 years old and have a printed credit in a comic book. That's pretty damn cool. Okay, we mentioned Dynamite Comics. I'm going to talk about a series that isn't a Dynamite comic, but has a lot of connective tissue to one. One of my favorite series from Dynamite Comics has been Project Superpowers, which took 1940s public domain superheroes and world spilt them into this new concept of bringing them up to date into the, at this point, 21st century. And the book that I'm going to be talking about kind of does the same thing, but it's pretty much Project Superpowers on cocaine. There is a new superheroes-based imprint from Antarctic Press. Antarctic Press is Ben Dunn's comic book publishing house. There's a new Rock Comics, ROK Comics, and one of the first books they've put out is Heroes at Large, #1, frozen in the 1940s, thawed out in 2018. And what you have here is just like as in Project Superpowers, you have a series of heroes, including public domain mainstays like Airboy and Catman and Kitten, become revived by the government. And these heroes form a new government-sponsored team to combat the evils of today. And that's the general story. Now, what you have in the first issue is you have the putting together the band, and then you have a reprint of a Catman story from 1941. But they took the art, they didn't take the dialogue from 1941. The dialogue is very much 2019. So marrying what happens in the first part of the book with what happens in the second part of the book, just understand that individuals in the 1940s, maybe they weren't as wholesome as we think. It's a lot of fun. In a lot of ways, a lot of dirty fun. So the writer of the book, let me get these names correct because these are new names to me. The writer is Matthew Spradlin, and the art is by David Hutchinson. David Hutchinson is also doing the principal covers of the book. I think it's planned right now for a 4-issue miniseries run. And again, I just go back to the Reader's Digest elevator pitch version of how to describe the series, Project Superpowers on Cocaine.
Which pretty much does it. That right there is the perfect description.
Okay, Steve, throw one more book at me.
Okay, so my last book, and it's, again, very timely at the time that we're recording this, but Umbrella Academy Hotel Oblivion #5. So Hotel Oblivion is the latest story arc. In fact, it's only the 3rd story arc in the Umbrella Academy series by Gerard Way and Gabriel Ba. The first 2 came out in 2009, 2010, and then there was a bit of a wait, kind of like Young Justice, between seasons 2 and 3, for Gerard Way, who was extremely busy with many other things, including, the Young Animal imprint over at DC. But he did finally get back to doing Umbrella Academy. And has plans, of course, for several more series, I think, that are already sketched out, plotted, and ready to start after Hotel Oblivion is complete. Now, the one interesting thing about Hotel Oblivion is that it plays with all the time that we do not see or haven't yet seen with the Umbrella Academy. It does take place, right? Picks up right after the second series, after the second story arc. But it refers back to quite a bit, sort of the intervening years between, the first glimpse that we get about the Umbrella Academy kids in the original series, with them fighting crime and attacking aliens in Paris, because the Eiffel Tower is actually an alien rocket ship, of course. But during the decades that they fought crime, there were dozens upon dozens of villains that they fought. And this has only just been alluded to, usually off page or through a flippant comment from one of the characters. Well, the fact of the matter why we don't see these villains today in the current world is because almost all of them, or at least all of the very strange and superpowered ones, have been locked away in a secret pocket dimension called Hotel Oblivion. And this Hotel Oblivion is quite literally a hotel at the, in some pocket universe that looks like it's at the end of the world, where there's really no escape. There's no place to go. The hotel provides for everything. And these villains are essentially there, forgotten for the rest of their natural lives, or unnatural lives, depending. And over the course of the 5 issues that have come out so far for this, I believe it's a 6, possibly 7 issue story arc. We've been seeing some of those characters getting ready to escape. Mixed in between where the Umbrella Academy kids are today, where modern day it's pretty tragic. There's a lot of craziness going on, of course. Rumor and Number 5 team up and start going through trying to figure out what's going on alongside Number 2. Number 1 is off in sort of the after space, which is some sort of hyperspace, doing some exploring with some other minor characters from previous story arcs in Umbrella Academy. But really the focus is on what's going on, or what's happening behind the scenes and off panel in Hotel Oblivion. And Number 5 ends with essentially every single supervillain that they've ever fought, any strange character, bizarre supernatural being, or other meta, essentially escaping into the normal world. So it promises to really kind of change things for Umbrella Academy, hopefully in a way that allows us to really kind of see what kind of excitement Gerard Way is going to be planning for us in the future story arcs. Because that's one of the things that's been very interesting with the way he's played this so far. He's really not revealed all that much. He has all these high concepts for these books and for these characters, but it's all seemingly off panel from the first 2 story arcs. So this is, I think, the first time that he's really showing us how deep this world could have been or was before we as the reader start following it in the first 2 series. And of course, with the TV series right around the corner, premiering the same day as Doom Patrol, except this time on Netflix, hopefully the excitement drummed up by that will get him and Dark Horse in gear and get the next series started and published soon. So we don't have another 8-year wait between
Okay.
this and the next one. So
All right. Well, I would not be me without talking about a DC comic book on this podcast. So the book that I am going to be closing out this segment with is Hawkman number 8. Hawkman is currently written by Robert Venditti with art by Brian Hitch. A big complaint from some people who are not that familiar with DC Comics is that it's hard to get around the continuity. I don't really see how that's an issue, but sometimes with Hawkman, I get it. This has been a really interesting exercise in how to reweave continuity, tie it in to an event. This does spin out of the events of Dark Knight's Metal, and put a character on a journey through himself. That really is the core of this book. From the first issue, Hawkman has been traveling not just the world, but through space, searching for clues from his previous lives to combat a new set of enemies called the Deathbringers. In doing this, he is exploring himself. He's exploring his past lives. Now, again, Hawkman can reincarnate not through just time, but through space. So it turns out that there was a Kryptonian version of Carter Hall. And the Kryptonian version of Carter Hall is, you don't have to stretch too far to get a name, Carter All. It turns out he had a number of very close connections with the L family. He was actually Kara Zor-El's teacher, and he is bearing witness to the destruction of Krypton. Hawkman at present has this ability to communicate and to actually engage with his past lives. One thing that's been a constant through the exploration of the lives is some remember more of the past lives than others. And this version of Hawkman seems to know a lot more than Carter himself knows at this point. Again, you hit Krypton just at the point where we're going to be saying goodbye to it. You see a nobility in Carter. You can understand that this is somebody that would not be too far removed from the L family if the L family is based on Hope through the family crest. He's Hope married with reason. One interesting thing, though, is Hitch is really good at these sweeping widescreen comics. The first half of the book is actually fairly slow, but when the action hits, i.e. the destruction of Krypton, it hits in a big, big way. And there's very few artists that I think can do that as well as Brian Hitch. I think this series has been a really positive development for the character in general. I do think that Hawkman does have a place as probably the principal B-list character, and I hope this book keeps his footing in the DC universe, because I don't see any reason why that it's not a character that can't maintain a monthly book for an extended period. It's been a great series, and this so far has been the best issue yet. And plus, a lot of the stories have also functioned as done in one or done in twos, and this is also beyond everything a done in one. So if you pick this book up and don't have a complete sense of the 7 issues that happened prior to it, I don't think you'd really be that lost in the mix. I'm sorry for abbreviating a lot of my reviews, but we've got to get off the horn here. But we've been at this longer than you've been listening. So that's my final recommendation for a comic book, and that is Hawkman number 8.
I totally second that recommendation. I think Hawkman's been such a great series since it's restarted under Hitch. I think it's just cool. Love the concepts. I haven't read issue number 8, but the previous 7, I mean...
Yeah, 7 has the revelation of the character's background of the first Hawkman, which is, for me, I was really surprised they took that route. And I think in some ways it makes sense with this quest with a notion of redemption. Because I think essential to the series, I don't know if you agree with me, Steve, but it's a hero not getting what he expects in almost every note. And you certainly get that here as well with this particular issue, but particularly in what is basically the new origin that just preceded it. I'd also be interested to hear about how this reads in trade. With the series being so regimented, remember the story with the Atom was like very much like framed within 2 issues.
Yeah,
it'd be interesting to see if, over an extended period, if there still is, if there's a different takeaway from the collection. I don't know. It'd be interesting to hear from people who read it as a trade. I'd be really interested to hear what people think about the series, if they did feel that there was enough connective tissue to feel like a trade.
Interesting. No, I agree. I mean, there is that sort of overarching story, so you can. I think if you're reading it just issue to issue, you could kind of see the connective tissue between everything, because it is a main story. He's basically searching for his past, who he is, who he was, what that means, and every issue just kind of fills in a little bit of that puzzle, with a few sort of like, one-off stories, sort of like, and here he is experiencing this life, and here he is experiencing this adventure. But yeah, I mean, I think how they put it together in the trades is really going to determine how people would read it. Yeah, I don't know how they do it. It'd be great if they just like put it all in one giant omnibus trade, but then 5 people would buy it probably because it would be $40.
All right, well, we're going to wrap this episode of the Comic Book Bears up, and when we do wrap an episode of the Comic Book Bears podcast up, we do so with the segment we call the Woofs of the Week segment, where we signify anything, be it a film or a comic book or a charitable initiative, anything under the sun that we think you, fair listener, may be interested in sampling. Steve, I'm going to go to you first. What is your Woof of the Week?
My Woof of the Week is actually not a TV show. But it was TV produced, so I guess TV adjacent. BBC Studios this year, they pretty much put the cap on David Bowie memories of footage of documentaries about over the past year and a half, 2 years. They've really just been throwing out David Bowie stuff left and right. And some of it's hit or miss, some of it's pretty redundant, but earlier the month of February, late January, early February, they put out a documentary called David Bowie Finding Fame. And it's about an hour and a half and is wonderful because it really looks at the history of David Bowie before he was David Bowie, like all caps David Bowie. So his early years, trying to find his place in the music scene, trying to find his voice and his style through the 60s and early 70s. So I learned a lot that I had no idea about. And it's really interesting seeing how much of a failure David Bowie was at the start. And actually for a good 10 years was not the success that he believed he should be. And of course, the success that we all knew him to be through the 70s, 80s, 90s, etc. So I wholeheartily recommend this if you are a David Bowie fan, if you are sort of David Bowie, knowledgeable. I think this is a really great documentary. They do a lot of interviews with the people that he worked with at the time. So there's different band members in the late 60s with the different bands that he sung with. His cousin, who he essentially was raised with for part of his childhood. It's really interesting finding out what he was like before he became the David Bowie. And it follows it all the way up through Ziggy Stardust. So highly recommend it. Very well produced, directed by Francis Whately. David Bowie Finding Fame. If you have a chance to see it, definitely pick it out.
Okay. I'm really interested in that. I love 60s Bowie. I love the embryonic version of the man. And there were also very distinct periods in the 60s of his development.
Yeah.
Very much the mod thing going on, with a lot of the music. Particularly You've Got a Habit of Leaving, which, is basically shaking hands with bands like the Small Faces and the Who. And then he gets into this like weird but wonderful Anthony Newley kind of period with the actual debut album, David Bowie 1967 album. I love 60s Bowie, so I'm really interested. I'm really, really interested, and I'm glad you got to do that because I'm down the road. That probably would be one of my whoops of the week once I actually see it.
Yeah, I'll find a way to get it to you, but if not, then we'll just watch it the next time you're in North Carolina.
My woof of the week goes to another music documentary. How do you like that? Initially, I was going to do the Alliance of American Football, but the Beatles won out. But the Beatles didn't really win out because the documentary I'm talking about is Strange Fruit, the Beatles Apple Records. I don't know how this one passed me by. It actually was released in 2011, and the same creative team behind this did one of my favorite documentaries about Kraftwerk and the origins of krautrock. They also have a pretty good documentary about Nine Inch Nails and industrial music in general, and they also have a documentary about Leonard Skinner. Now, for me to be enraptured in a Leonard Skinner documentary, they're doing something right. But the narrator is Thomas Arnold, and Thomas Arnold has one of the most wonderful narrative voices. So if you ever see him on IMDb narrating something, just run to it. They're mostly music-based documentaries. And again, the documentary is called Strange Fruit, the Beatles' Apple Records, and it doesn't take the focus on the Beatles, but it takes the focus on the artists that they signed to their own record label that they started in 1968, known as Apple Records, that went up until 1975 or so. And you cover artists that were not very successful on Apple but gained success afterwards, like James Taylor and Billy Preston. You have a lot of coverage of the bigger artists on the label, like Mary Hopkin and Badfinger. Some of the more obscure artists on the label, like Jackie Lomax. You get an understanding of acts that the Beatles were just not together enough to actually sign properly. There were acts like Crosby, Stills and Nash and Yes. Through it, you also had the Beatles breaking up through the Apple Records story, and the litigious aspect of the dissolution of the band and how much that affected the other artists on the label. Really, really well done documentary. If you have the Tubi app, it's available for free there. Strange Fruit, the Beatles' Apple Records.
Cool.
All right, well, we're going to wrap this one up on a musical note. Da-da-da-da-da. Oh,
Play
folks.
us out. Play us
Oh,
out.
baby, folks, it's late. Oh, God. But we muddled through it there, didn't we, Steve?
Oh, yeah.
We love talking about comics. So again, we are the Comic Book Bears Podcast. You can find us on the Facebook as Comic Book Bears Podcast. You can find us on the Twitter and the Tumblr and the Instagram as Comic Book Bears. And then if you want to reach out to us, you can do so by sending an email to comicbookbears@gmail.com. And if you want to listen to us, as always, you can subscribe to us through iTunes. You can listen to us through Stitcher Radio. And you can catch us on some of the other podcatching platforms. Until next time, I'm Billy Z.
And I'm Steve Morey.
You're going to hear a woof and an explosion, and we'll be back real soon. Take care, everyone.
Woof!